All right. On today's podcast, we are welcoming Shawn Gold, the CEO and founder of Pilgrim Soul. We're stoked to learn a little bit more about how cannabis can infuse creativity. Shawn is heading up that front in this brand and initiative. Shawn, welcome to the podcast, brother.
I've been dreaming about being on the Backpocket podcast for months, and here it is. Here I am. It's almost like a little bit nervous. You guys seem kind of friendly, though. You'll make it easy, right?
Yeah, we're good guys at the end of the day. I mean, we're here to have a good time, share some laughters, and learn about yourself, man.
Love to talk about myself, so this is an ideal scenario.
Right on. I'm glad we found you. So I got to start. You have a really nice, organized office space behind you, and I got to know. And just for the listeners, it's kind of looks like little cubicle slots little cubby holes you can put different things in. And I'm seeing a potential. Looks like there's a ladder, so this thing must go up. You must have real high ceilings, which is a sweet flex. That's amazing. But then I'm also noticing, is that an abacus behind you?
It's an abacus in case you got to really, just put together some numbers real quick.
Right. So you're a crunching numbers kind of guy.
Well, as an entrepreneur, you got to crunch numbers, or you run out of money, or you run out of product, or you run out of time.
Right. Mm-hmm. So on your hierarchy of product, money, and time, what's your ranking of those three?
Time. First, money, second, then product. With more time, I can make more money.
With more money, you can make more product.
I can make more product, exactly.
That's classic, man.
With more product, I can make more money.
Right on. So you told us off air, obviously, that you're coming in, or you're tuning in here, in the Zoom world from Los Angeles, California, which is sweet, in the Hollywood Hills. Just curious, how you got there, man. I'd love to hear a little bit of a background of like your come up. I'd love to hear a little bit of how Pilgrim Soul started, which is how we found you. And I'd just love to learn a little bit of background about you, man. I don't know where I don't know where you want to start, but take it from there.
Well, it's a long story. I'll give you the short version. As far I grew up in Southern California. In New Jersey, and Southern California was like a beacon for me. It's like I just had to be there. It was the great, the Six Flags of my imagination for just culture and fun and lifestyle. But I went to Syracuse and then moved to New York City and became really good in New York City, which is hard to do. And then I really kind of, I moved to California chasing a woman, got the woman, still have the woman.
Congratulations.
Congrats. That's huge.
Actually, the name of my brand, Pilgrim Soul, is named after a poem I used to seduce the woman, which I could share later. And so, love is the only acceptable reason to do anything stupid. I was in love. Oh, okay, problem. That makes sense. But, California, when I first moved to California, my wife's from here, and she was like, and I was like, like in New York, people are mean to you, but they don't really mean it. In LA, people are nice to you, but they don't really mean it. And I would say, cynical stuff about LA all the time. People move to New York with a plan. They move to LA with a dream. And she was like, dude, any place is what you make of it. I was like, damn, she's right. It's like, maybe not St. Louis, but I know what you mean. So I was in startups in New York early. I had a company you could listen to music on the telephone before the internet, dialing 800 numbers. And then when the internet came along, I got involved with some of the early startups in New York in like 1995. And not many people had experience with like interactive marketing. And I did because of my background. So I started one of the first online zines and one of the first online advertising agencies. And then chasing a woman, the woman, I moved out to Los Angeles and got involved with this like online entertainment company. We eventually incubated MySpace. Before we incubated MySpace, I left and started blog companies with a guy named Jason Calcanis. We had Engadget and Autoblog and Joystick, and we sold those to AOL. Didn't even have an office like when we sold that. Sold it for like $25 million, like 4 people and no office. And then the MySpace guys really wanted me to work with them the whole time. So I joined them as the chief marketing officer, helped scale that business from 25 million to 100 million users. And then left that business to really kind of do my own thing, start my own startup, which was just okay. It was a bit of I'd say it's ultimately a failure. Sold it to Evite, but it wasn't really a great idea. And it was actually my wife's idea, which probably, it wasn't my own passion. I was like, there's a couple of reasons why I did that. At the time, they got involved with a company called Wattpad, which was like one of the first online storytelling platforms, probably 70 million active users now. And then from Wattpad, I became chief marketing officer of a company called Textile. We launched Rihanna's lingerie brand, and Fabletics and Shoe Dazzle and Just Fab, $1 billion in sales, subscription fashion commerce brand. But while I was there, I was helping out the CEO of MedMen. I was helping out the guys, the Stanley Brothers with Charlotte's Web, the iconic CBD brand. And then I was looking to get into the cannabis space. I was also helping out this company called Lowell Herb Company. It was the #1 pre-roll brand in California, which pretty makes them the #1 pre-roll brand in the world. And I became chief marketing officer of that company, helped scale that some more. I did a collaboration with Notorious B.I.G.'s Kid. I used cannabis for creativity my whole life. I've used it really for a second opinion in all of these startups and to invent things and challenge my own default thinking and a bunch of other reasons why I've used it. But I tested an idea with Notorious B.I.G.'s Kid. I gave him 7 strains of cannabis that index high for creativity. He smoked them, ranked them. We put together a specific blend for him. We gave a portion of the proceeds to the California Prison Arts Project, and we sold like 10,000 packs in a week. And I just saw the product market fit with that. I've been thinking about starting my own brand for a while, so I just launched into Pilgrim Soul, which is a brand focused on cannabis for creativity. This is just one of my brands, Creative Imagination. I have creative focus and creative reflection and creative awareness. And then I also have a bunch of curriculum that I've created meant to be used while you're high. Because you can smoke my Creative Imagination plan, still think about your ex-husband or your mortgage. If you're not in the right headspace, you're not going to have a creative experience. So I created the Pilgrim Soul Creative Thinking Journal. It says, please use this journal while you are high, because we're a very polite brand. And it's a guided journal filled with probably like 50 different exercises. There's an adult coloring page. This one is a collaboration with Martin Lawrence, the comedian. It's about to come out in a week. Then we created a bunch of other products, all created to enhance the efficacy of cannabis and creativity. And California is a really hard place to launch a cannabis brand. It is like kind of what they say about New York City. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Very much the case with cannabis in California. It's really difficult to launch a brand. And the brand I'm launching is, I wasn't worried about it because it's a very different brand and a very focused approach to cannabis. And it's really a creativity company where cannabis is one of the products, which makes it kind of really the secret sauce of this brand. That's kind of how I got to Southern California. Got the girl, got the job, made some mistakes, wear a lot of sunscreen, try to hydrate as much as I can. Of course, I floss.
Shawn, I mean, congratulations. That is an incredible journey to get to where you are today. I'm stoked to unpack a little bit of this, from inducing creativity to, chipping away at all of these businesses and finding Pilgrim Soul at the end of the day. What do you think led you down the path of creativity early on? Like, why was that the initial draw? I mean, you talked about digital marketing online, like that was like the initial kickstart of like a career wise, but maybe like more personally, what was the creative aspect that kept pushing you in that direction?
Well, I'm a huge fan of, creative thinking, out of the box thinking. I was an awful student, and I was one of those people like, people thought I was, when I was young, people thought I was very smart. My parents thought I was very smart. I have friends who are incredibly smart, who got good grades, who are, running some of the most significant companies in Silicon Valley. But I just, my brain worked a different way, and somewhat ADD, some like dyslexia. I just could not read, I would read the same page over and over again in college. So I hacked my way through education by audiobooks and just listening and different types of learning, doing things. And I sort of created my own systems for learning and like everything I had to do was sort of creative and original. So when I first started like doing job interviews at like Condé Nast, I just couldn't get past human resources. People were like, I don't really get this guy. So the only companies that would hire me really were like startups who just needed someone to invent something. Like, we don't know how this works. Like, we need to empathize with consumers, figure out what it is, build new process systems and structure. And, and so I was the guy who started doing that. Obviously I learned as I went on and figured things out, but very early in my career, like come up with the idea, like reimagine the way it works, because I didn't know the way it was supposed to work. And then like once it started scaling, they'd bring in like the McKinsey guys and be like, okay, we got it from here. We're going to like scale this thing. Thank you for starting it. Thanks for the ideas. Now that I'm a little older, I'm able to hedge off the McKinsey. I hire them actually after a while because I'm still bad, at process systems and structure.
That's awesome. It's an interesting trend that we see is like someone who's just like not very good at the school side of things, but can employ their brain in such unique ways. That's awesome that you picked up on that early on, because there's so many people probably that don't know that about themselves yet, that they can really deploy that side of them. So kudos to you on that, man. My next question is, how did you find the woman? How did you get yourself to California? Like, she was already there. Did you see her in passing? Like, did you even know the woman existed in California?
Yeah. So I was at a party, like a Hollywood producers party, which is not a great place to meet someone of substance. And I went up and after I was in Hollywood for a while, I realized like the best way to kind of meet someone at these parties is to be kind of not a jerk, but slightly offensive. And not offensive, but just like rub people wrong. Just being nice, let's just put it this way, was not an effective strategy. So, and I can go, this is a whole nother podcast about that. It really so I approached her and I was like, it just wasn't working. So I said, I just kind of excused myself, and I came back later. I was like, I'm sorry for my approach. Like, you're obviously really bright. I'd love to talk to you. And I just changed that. And then when we spoke, and I lived in New York for the most part, she lived in LA, and it took us about 2 months to maybe get a date going. When I came back, it was kind of bi-coastal. I really thought this woman was out of my league. I think it's a good thing. You should feel that your woman is out of your league, and most of them are. So you're pretty safe. So my strategy was like, I don't think I'm going to get this woman, but the only shot I have at it is being awesome. So I'm going to be the most awesome guy I can possibly be, just honest and straightforward and interested and a listener and then I was like, I still don't think I'm going to get her, but in the end, I'll end up awesome. So it's a win-win. And she didn't want us to, she wanted to see other people. Like, I was like, this is the woman for me. She was indifferent. I like to say she feigned indifference for the first 4.5 years when I was dating her. And then we got married, and then it was actual indifference for the next 25 years. So supposed to laugh at that part. So you're like, that's sad. So, so I, just like it happens, I said, look, I tried my best. You know who I am. And, you don't want me. I give given you all I've got, my best stuff. You don't want me, and I feel good. I feel good about it. I feel like I did everything I could. I'm not going to walk away from this feeling like I didn't try, and I'm a better person because of knowing it. And then I hung up the phone, kind of broke up with her, and like an hour later, the relationship like flip-flopped completely. This is in the days of faxes, and I had like a 10-page fax when I got back to my house, my apartment in New York, which was like just what a fool she was. And then, we shortly after we set a date to get married, and then I wouldn't say it's happily ever after, but it's it's like you choose someone you can work at life with. Like life throws so many things, so many curveballs at you, and you really need to find someone that you can work at life with. Like I always say you should marry someone who you think you can have a happy divorce with. Not because you're most likely to end up that way, but because if you think you can have a happy divorce with someone, you likely have a strong friendship and a great level of communication, which are the ingredients for an enduring marriage. And you're less likely to get divorced if you think you can have a happy divorce with someone.
Wow.
I'm first off very happy that we're recording this because this is the advice I needed to hear. And and let's continue down this train for a sec, because asking for a friend, and that friend is myself. I'm here in Minneapolis, and I recently went on a date in Boston. And it was more of a friendly date. We hadn't seen each other in a couple of years. It was like catching up with each other, but we really hit it off, and it was really nice. I need some advice here. What are my next steps? You just talked about being, coast to coast and making it work. I know you're drawing back to the past here, but I would love some advice, because my head is scrambling right now.
Yeah. Well, it helps if both people are really busy and career focused, because then they're not like bored and looking for something else. That actually, our relationship probably wouldn't have worked in the same city. I probably would have been a stalker. So she was just like super focused on her career, and I was definitely number two. And being long distance, it was easier for that. I communicated with her in lots of different surprising ways. So at the time, I guess email wasn't really as much of a thing, but I wrote letters, and I sent faxes, and I called, and we set time, and I really thought about the things that I was going to say to her before I even communicated with her. It was like a romance of letters, like, back in the romantic era. And then, when we would definitely plan to get together, and I'd do stuff and have experiences that were really cool. Just like doing, just having shared experiences that were memorable and interesting and adventurous that we could both experience together for the first time. There's a great saying that love is to distance as wind is to fire, enkindles the great and extinguishes the small. So there's a lot there. It can be a really charming way to start a relationship. Like what's happened in COVID is you have these people like on dating apps, and they're going on Zoom back and forth, and they're really like, before they actually together, they're sharing a lot about themselves and learning who each other are. So the time they finally get together, it's like really kind of it's a cultured relationship, or I'm not finding the right word, but it's like, it's frothy.
It's a little bit
more
prepped.
Meaningful.
Yeah.
It's prepped.
It's a little warm.
Yeah.
Put it in the oven for a little bit.
It's warm. It's preheated.
There you go. No, that's really good advice. I think just being unique about your communication in the ways, we have so many different ways to communicate nowadays that, I think a fax to your distant lover, Andrew, is like something that we may need to search and look into a little further.
Yeah. By the way, I used to write a relationship advice column for L.com a while back. So I have a lot of things to say about relationships. Yeah,
no, I love the quote you had, but I also love like the just general intention of, that if they're career driven and they have like their individual self that they're focused on as like a main priority, that when those two kind of intersect, when those two people kind of intersect and they have, each other on kind of the same level playing field, that it works a little bit better. Because I can just tell you right now, I've dated people in the past who have had nothing else on their plan besides just like having a boyfriend or something. And that causes a lot of issues. So I love what you're saying there. Makes sense.
It's the worst out here. And like a relationship is as happy as the least happy person in it. So you got to find someone who likes themselves, who's interested in life. Like if you are, and there's, not everybody needs like a driven, partner, but you guys probably do. I did.
Yeah. Gonna definitely confirmed on that end for sure. So I also gotta ask, well, actually, Andrew, do you have any other questions or building off what you were saying before?
No, I mean, just basically, I think that's the next step. I mean, like I'm already picturing, because I got some downtime at the end of the holiday season. I'm in digital marketing as well. So this is the holiday season, Cyber Monday, online sales, mega busy. But I got some downtime. I'm looking to do something for the turn of the calendar, the new year, but to instigate maybe meeting up somewhere, maybe somewhere warm because she's in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like being unique with my communication is going to be it's going to be so fun too. I think that's what like really excites me about what you talked about is like being interested and challenging yourself to be unique in the way you communicate. Sparks so much more just like internal fulfillment and internal joy versus simply like phone call, text.
Totally. Like I sent her, I had mailed her like, I'd mail her like, I lived in New York, I'd mail her like a dozen bagels from New York. I mean, obviously New York bagels. I also, one time I mailed her like one of those hand mixers, like a mixer, but a hand beater like this. I just saw it like a flea market or something. I was like, oh, shit. And I forget, I had some kind of story I attached to it, but just like a random object. She's like, opens her mail as a hand mixer, not completely not useful. Everyone has mixers, she's like, what, why? It's just like, but that's like, but she laughed and it made her day, and it was different. It was like, no other person's going to send her a hand mixer. Like she was dating also like a lot of like some guys one guy's a billionaire today and another guy is like also not far away. And they were, they liked her because she was indifferent and not into them, but it was more of a possession for them and not really, it was an accomplishment. And I had a lot less going on. I was really into her and what made her tick. And, and I was trying to uncover that and discover it. It was clear. Obviously it was evident to her, which is, I probably should tell you the poem now.
Yes, that was my next question.
Poem.
Yeah. So the poem it's the brand Pilgrim Soul is named after her. And the poem actually, and this is my cannabis brand, it's a really beautiful live resin vape where I mix multiple strains together. And then hidden up under the foam here, little Easter egg underneath this, if you take this out, if you happen to take it out, no one would necessarily know to do it, but it is the poem that I used to seduce her. And it's 4 lines. It's by William Butler Yeats, who was a Nobel Prize winning poet in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and also experimented with cannabis in Paris with Monet and writes about it. So the poem is about a guy trying to convince a girl that he loves more than just her beauty, and that love is enduring when even if that beauty fades. And the poem, 4 lines, here it goes. How many loved your moments of glad grace and loved your beauty with love false or true? But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you and loved the sorrows of your changing face. So
sick.
The pilgrim soul is the native, in the context of my brand, the pilgrim soul is the native creative explorer that's born inside of all of us. It is who we really are, the life force in us that we tend to lose. We're all born this creative being and then we like squash it. because of mistakes and expectations and fear of judgment and fear of risks and relying on default thinking and standardized tests and lack of sleep and all these things. And Pilgrim Soul is not so much about teaching people how to be creative. It's more about how to unlearn the things that made you not creative. And there's techniques. There are techniques that we teach you to unlearn those.
Right on. That's a really cool way to look at it. Just basically like there's just something. I like the idea that I think the last line mentions loving for sorrows in the changing atmosphere or whatever. So it's just,
right.
Which to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like that's loving someone or loving about someone that could be their loving the downfall about someone or loving their struggles or something that, in that realm. Is that correct?
Love their evolution, be it
yes.
de-evolution or re-evolution or just evolution in itself. It's to love. This line is to love the sorrows of your changing face. Like beauty phase, really. You gotta love. And I really asked myself, going back to her, I asked myself that question. It's like, are you in love with this girl because she is indifferent to you? Like, you got to check yourself on that. Are you in love with her, because she's beautiful? Will you want her when she, as you grow old together? Like what? Like I really asked myself a lot of hard questions. And I also use cannabis for that too, because cannabis is like a truth stone for me. I smoke it and I sort of back up and I'm able to see things more symphonically and look at the big picture. And, and also you make these nonlinear connections. And so that was helpful in just really deciding, be careful what you choose for. Do you really want what you're going for? And what are the motive? Why are you going for this? So, and then one of the reasons my wife was, kind of indifferent to me is because she didn't have a father role growing up. She was raised by a single mom. And so, that's not insignificant. I knew that in our relationship together, that would be an issue at times. That would come out the way she deals with men or relationship with men. And there were hard times and that came up. And I said, remember, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, when you said you were going to work through that and you got to work through it. Now's the time. So you got to go, what does it say? Go into a marriage with your eyes wide open and like experience the marriage with your eyes half closed or something like that, where you have to kind of not be upset by everything is what that means. Kind of like,
right.
Yeah. So this is a relationship show, right?
Oh yeah.
100%.
We're diving into relationships here. Well, I guess like inside of that, right? So the external relationship, there's the internal relationship, and the other part of the brand that I appreciate is, Pilgrim, being an adventurer, being an explorer. And what I love about like smoking weed and kicking back with my friends or smoking weed and journaling is that internal adventure that I can see a little bit more clearly. I have more enjoyment on it. I have less internal stress. I have a little bit of anxiety that I deal with. So smoking some weed always calms me down and brings me back to being present and not worrying about tomorrow or the past. And I find your story to have so much truth in that. Like the way that you've talked about your past, the way that you talked about your wife and the business that you're currently running, you're so present minded and you're so appreciative of things that have happened. And, I think a part of that is how marijuana helps us. Just absolutely take a deep breath and relax and then recognize what's going around us.
Yeah. But cannabis can add, I use cannabis to enhance reality, not to be reality. That's why our brand is very much about low dosage, like, to add value to what you're already doing, to the experience, not make it the entire experience. So yeah. And again, cannabis is really, I use it for empathy. Like if someone asks me, people often say, what do you attribute to your success in your career? And empathy is my number one answer. I'm in marketing generally. So empathy is really everything. You use data for empathy. But instinct, empathy, is like data can be misleading. You need to test your data and talk to people and connect with people and see through the holes in the data. And empathy and cannabis, I use cannabis to empathize, to really focus on problems, go deep inside them, to empathize with, the target audience. Like I created one of the first websites for Hot Wheels, and called Speed City, and I didn't have kids. So the goal when you work for a brand like Hot Wheels, the way Hot Wheels or any kids brand works, it's about the nag factor. And you have to create excitement. You have to communicate with the kid. And there's a bunch of rules around that, and create excitement with the kid. So they ask the mom to buy them the Hot Wheels. And I didn't have kids. I didn't have a wife. I'm not a mom. So I had to really empathize and talk to kids and talk to moms and really read a bunch of research on it and do empathy. And I used, I used cannabis to sort of think through that scenario and almost in so many other scenarios when it comes to reaching a particular target audience. Even in when I was in the blog space, we did some of the first professional blogs, and we were looking to integrate advertising into it. And people were like, advertising is going to kill blogs. This was early days of blogs, and blogs people were purists. And I was like, obviously that's not true. You can't scale any business without some kind of revenue source. So I was like, well, how do we add value? How do these advertisers add value to the community instead of detract from the community? And this idea for something called focus ads, where every ad was technically a focus group. Underneath the ad, there was a link that said, if you have experience with this product or service, click here, share your experience. So it became and we would only take brands, products that we really believed in. This is for Engadget, which is about technology, electronics. We did really one of the first to do native ads, which, advertorial. I mean, it's in blogs. That's been around since probably advertising has been around. But we would write them. We'd use a different font. We were very transparent. We write these reviews of our advertisers. They pay us, and we write them. We only pick advertisers that we like, and we denoted that it's an ad. We used a different font for it, but we're writing this, and this is what we really think about it. It was we use transparency to our advantage. We lean into this sort of advertising, to really change the paradigm a bit and add value to the experience for the consumer. So those are just some ways where I used empathy and cannabis and empathy. I'm not completely high all the time. I mean, most of the time I am not, because I'm not really great at being high while I'm taking in information. And then I like to sort through that information, also not high, but then I like to go over it again, smoke cannabis, and I really enjoy this. This is one of my favorite things to do is work. You go over my work while I'm high and come up with stuff that nobody's thinking about.
Dude, you hit it right on the head. That's exactly that's one of my favorite things to do as well, is that review process, or do something where you look at a set list of rules or something that's already previously built, and then you get to look at it again, no pressure, and just kind of get to look at it from a different lens. And that's when that adventure, that pilgrim kind of comes out of me. One way I do this specifically is, a couple years ago, I started doing stand-up comedy, and I would record myself going, and I still do. I record myself and go up on stage. Usually before I go up on stage, even I've already come up with jokes or lines or various things to say up on stage. I'll write those things down before I go up on stage. I'll record them as I go when I perform, and then I will review basically right after and just kind of make an initial judgment. But then what I'll do a second time, either later that night or the following day or whenever I have some time, is I'll have my notes out and I'll smoke a joint and I'll listen back to what I said. And then I'll be able to not only hear how I presented it, because there's flaws in that presentation, but then I'll also just look at the structure that I tried to follow, or the thing I had previously built, with a different lens. And you wouldn't be and they talk, in comedy, how you have different branches and how you try and connect branches to a main point or something to get yourself a joke. And so it's really fun to start making those branches off of your main joke that you're trying to deliver and intertwine those to give yourself a set. So doing that over and over and over again, I found like Cannabis to be a huge asset to creativity. And so you saying that right now just like totally fired me up, man. That's exactly what I do.
Yeah. I think that's also more like Martin Lawrence does the same thing. He's really architects a lot of, all his sets and uses Cannabis certainly to do that.
Right on.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the books itself, the journals that kind of activate further creativity and even more enjoyment? Sometimes you can do with other people. I know Deck just had completed one of the books, correct, Deck?
Yeah, I haven't completed it, but my girlfriend and I definitely took a deep dive in, and it was fun to go through some of these lessons and different things while high and just like make up different like go through and either color if you wanted to go through that route, or some of the activities. Like one in particular I really liked was come up with 4 names of different people and then write their bios of each person and try and tell a story. So it was a fun oh, go ahead.
Was it the one where I give you the names and you write the bios of the people?
Yeah, or, I think so. Here, one sec.
Like I give you like August Gold or Ethel McMurtry, or like I give you these like just random names.
Yes, that's what it is. It was you. Correct. That is correct. Yes, Ethel McMurdy, Donald Lynch, Tiffany Briggs, Austin Gold, or August Gold, and you describe these people, and then so like my girlfriend and I did that individually. What did I say for August Gold?
Yeah.
So, well, it's not going to make sense unless I read all of them because what I ended up
related.
Yeah. So, I basically I started with like the first person, and then as I went down, I basically built out like a story of like a movie.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Love
it. that has some turns just as you read throughout the
only rule about using this book is to use it creatively. Like I give you some prompts that are all built. All the prompts, there's like in the book you have, there's like 50 different creative exercises, all borrowed from the top creative brainstorming, ideation, innovation books. I borrowed these techniques from everybody, and I just made the instructions more concise because no one wants to read a lot of instructions. And I made them a lot more fun, just like kind of turned them on the head, made them silly, a lot more interesting than they would be in all these other books. So like you laugh, and the goal is to like, again, it is infotainment. So like laugh and learn and share an experience with someone. There's a lot of people who use the books like you with someone else, and you learn about people too. Like there's this one exercise in there called word links, where you have one word and a seemingly unrelated word, and you have to create a bridge from one word to the other using 4 or 5 words. So it could be like hot sauce and senator, or duck and elevator, and then you have to like, what is the logical bridge? And it's really funny to see how people are like, really? That's your, like people will tell you. I did it with my wife, and I was like, that's how you think? That's how you got there? I never would have imagined that path. It's kind of funny to see how people think, and with a lot of these different exercises.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, Andrew, you're going to say something.
Yeah, and like the process behind building one of these books. So you're releasing one with Martin Lawrence. That's coming out in a couple weeks or a couple days.
Yeah.
What was that process like working? And I'm assuming not all of them have been with like a personality. But what was it like working with Martin Lawrence and taking apart his brain? I mean, you probably learned a ton about him, and then being able to put that into an adventure book.
Yeah. So the first one took a long time because this is also from an entrepreneur's perspective. Like I knew I was going to write a book meant to be used while you're high, and I had it in my pitch deck. I didn't really know what that book was going to be. I only knew what I didn't know what that was inside the book at all. I had a general idea, and I've done brainstorming and ideation and all these exercises, but I there wasn't a shadow of a doubt in my mind that I wasn't going to create something really cool and useful and interesting. I just hadn't done it yet, which was kind of interesting. It was surprising, even a little bit to me. I was just hyper confident on it. And I sat down to write it. I massaged it. I didn't, there's a bunch of different variables, and based on empathy, like no one wants to read this. Or what do people need? Like what's going to be fun? And then I sort of built this formula around the book where, like, even if you don't do any of the exercises, this book needs to be fun. Just if you read the exercise, it should be fun to read it and think about doing it, even if you don't do it. And then the format of the book is I give you the exercise, and there's like why you should do it, how it helps. Because some of these things are so silly and inane, you're like, I don't understand, help me with creativity. But then I explain why. And then that's kind of interesting too. And it's based on experts and research and stuff like that. And then there's an example, which not all of them have examples, but some of them have examples. And we try to make those funny as well. So the goal, again, is even if you don't do the exercises, it's a pretty funny book to have. And then I finally, after I did the first one, it really started to work. We've sold probably just under $4 million worth of the first one in the last year, like almost 200,000 of them. And so I have a formula now. And then the second one was easy. With Martin Lawrence, I watched all of Martin's stand-ups. I had a conversation with him. I watched all his stand-ups, tried to get into, what he's about. And then I put together a bunch of ideas and exercises. We talked about some of the exercises that make sense for him. I fleshed out a lot of these exercises. And then he kind of went over them and edited him and added his thoughts. When you're generally working with a celebrity or, very busy person like him, it's more about an editing. You have to like understand them, get into their head, put together some material where, they can get it, the last 10% is their edit. Because if they have to do more than, if they do more than 20%, 30% of it, one, it's going to be difficult to get their time and get it done. And they just don't have the time. So you have to kind of understand them, understand what they want, have a lot of good preamble about it, and then, know what you want from them on the editing side. So there's an example of like personal hell, where it's like, what would your personal hell? This is in the creative reflection. So the books are in 4 different sections, which correspond with actually my 4 different cannabis blends. So there's creative imagination, which is about divergent thinking, sort of silly ideas without judgment. There's creative awareness, which is about riffing on the world around you. There's creative focus, which is combining logic and creativity. And then there's exercises on creative reflection, which is looking inside yourself just to find creativity, very much like the artist's way. So I'm trying to find the one with my personal hell, where he gave me the answers. And it's about, there is no, other than the sections, there's no table of contents, because I want you to just use this book randomly and open up. The side of that is trying to find an exercise in here. So he would give what his personal hell was, which I'm trying to share with you if I can find the page. But also he didn't want this thing to be about him. It's not like he wanted to have influence on it. He's got an introduction to the book, and some of the examples are his that he's made up and they're funny. But it's not about like an homage to Martin Lawrence in any way, shape, or form.
Totally. Now, can you dive in a little bit more into those 4 different strains or 4 different sections, and kind of, I guess, clarify or dive in a little bit further on what that's all about? Because I've honestly never heard that. So you have 4 different strains that are focused on like awareness, focus, reflection, and then I forget the last one, but creative imagination, I believe, was the 4th one. How does that all kind of come about? Like, how do you decide the strains, or how does it like work from a back end standpoint? And then how does that And maybe you don't know the answer to this, or maybe you do, but like how it affects the endocannabinoids in your head and how that kind of changes based on each strain. I'd love to hear kind of how that all works.
So the way it came up, so what we did scientifically, I guess, is I work with this company called Abstracts Labs in Southern California, multiple PhDs in analytical chemistry. They supply terpenes to a lot of the top cannabis operators around the country and around the world. And what we did was we sort of scraped the data from sites like Leafly and a bunch of other sites that rank strains by how they affect you. And it's all based on survey data. So it's, this strain makes me, Jack Herrera makes me creative and euphoric and focused and relaxed. You see like the barcode on a lot of these things. So we looked at about 150 strains that index high for creativity and secondary and tertiary states of mind. Again, like euphoria and focus and creativity. And like happiness. And then we bought the flower and we analyzed the flower and we made 3D models of the cannabinoid and terpene profiles of the flower. And we bought multiple versions of a lot of the flower because grown indoor, grown outdoor, people call things different things that aren't necessarily the actual strain. And we mapped the cannabinoids and terpenes back to different states. So I was looking for the strains that most people make them focused and also creative, and strains that most people, are about awareness and creativity, or relaxation, or in creativity and reflection, which is more myrcene driven, like a more myrcene type of terpene in there. And so we blended different strains. Like this creative reflection blend, it's the only one that leans maybe a little more indica. It's got banana runts, blue dream, and pineapple express. And I mixed 3 different strains together. And then creative focus is really just more like high-powered sativa. This one happens to be Wookie Fruit, XJ13, and Lemon Jack. And for people who don't know terpenes, think about like limonene is a big one. Limonene is usually is like one of the more uplifting terpenes, and you can kind of imagine it by like when you walk down the aisle at the supermarket and you smell like the detergent, like it lifts you. You really smell a lot of limonene, and it sort of picks your head up a little bit when you're in the detergent aisle. And when you think about cannabis, like THC is the engine, and terpenes are really like the driver, like the steering wheel, and help you go where you're going. And you want the best case scenario, and the reason this is like a live resin, and live resin is a type of extraction. It's more of a full spectrum extraction where you're getting a lot of the terpenes and endocannabinoids and the cannabinoids in there that's really like, as nature intended, it is always generally the best way. Like I like to smoke flower more, and you can smoke a 20% THC, joint and get much higher than a 80% THC vape, because it's the cannabinoids and the entourage effect that are really driving that experience. And it's also a much more enduring and longer high as well.
Oh, I've noticed that. Yeah. Because I was always under the impression the higher THC, the more stoned you're going to get. But then I started to like scale back and do like you said, 20% THC joints or anything like that. And you'd realize like the highs in general are just totally unrelated. Like you can't even, it's so hard to compare the two. It's probably not even worth comparing the two, but that what you're saying supports that really.
Maximum THC is definitely not the goal for like, especially if you're looking to use like cannabis for productivity, purpose-driven recreational, or or even like sleep or something like that. That's just it's not the right approach. Mm-hmm. And then as far as how it affects like what cannabis does is it does 2 things that are really important. It lights up the frontal lobe and gets neurons firing in a more uninhibited way. So you're really producing, a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts through your brain. And it also does something it represses an area of the brain called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is the judgment area of the brain. And if you smoke too much, then it backfires. You get paranoid maybe, but it sort of, it represses that. And that is sort of the, like when you're daydreaming, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is sort of repressed, and it allows for daydreaming and dreaming in general. So those two things together get really idea production going. And it's important to know that, not all your ideas will be good ideas. It just means you'll have more ideas, probably crazier ideas, and a lot, but it's better to have 10 ideas than no ideas, or 10 ideas than 2 highly inhibited ideas. And, for me, one of those ideas is going to be interesting, or maybe it's going to be a great idea, or maybe it's going to be the kernel of an idea that I didn't even think about. It's maybe just proposing something to me as a way to look at something that I hadn't even thought about. And then I can go deeper into that idea later, or even at that moment. So it's really about challenging default thinking, looking at the world in a different way. And that's where, I have become useful to this world in like bringing things that people haven't thought of before.
Right on. Has there been a time in your own life where you've had an idea come to you, or some sort of pivot in your life, or some sort of maybe idea and just in general that has come to you that has been successful from smoking cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, this whole brand, I would say, again, it's all about your complete body of knowledge, and then what you do with that. It sort of allows me to like pull it up and play with it and switch it around and look at different angles. I have it in there. So you have to be a learning, evolving human being. And it really helps, like if you're, to be an expert in something and have even like diverse bodies of knowledge, so you can combine those bodies of knowledge to create something new. Creativity is generally, taking two previously existing things and putting them together in a new way that is some value to somebody, whether it's art or, everything around you is created. The chair you're sitting in is that was some creative project from someone. The cement, that might be under your feet, like someone invented cement at some point. They're like, oh, this is harder and more durable. Let's put these things together and mix them up. So, yeah, and also important to know that these journals are about creative thinking. They're creative thinking journals, not creativity journals. Anyone do creative thinking. When you think about creativity, you think like, oh, I'm going to draw a picture, I'm going to write a poem. This is about creative thinking and idea production and stuff you can use like in your job and almost any job. It's really, creative thinking is kind of what not only brings personal fulfillment, but separates the good from the great in almost any profession. Creative problem solving, creating, innovating, ideating, that sort of thing. Thank you for letting me talk so much.
No, we appreciate you sharing this. The consistency and you seeking originality is something I truly appreciate about your entire story. You talked about, meeting your love of your life. You weren't original in being in LA, and you were trying to be what LA told you were. You're like, wow, I really fell flat there. I'm going to go back and I'm going to be myself. And you walked us and our listeners down the path of your career, and you were hitting pain points of being original far ahead of the curve, whether it's the online learning that you talked about, that company, and even to this day with, I think, Pilgrim Soul. I think what Pilgrim Soul is getting at of making this full circle, internal dialogue and shared experience potentially, is what people are craving most. And you are offering it and having a perspective behind it that is promoting it and enhancing it and pushing the needle. It's really going to make waves. I mean, it's already made waves. You said you made $4 million, 200,000 copies, something like that. That's incredible. And I'm happy people are like catching on and investing in this, because there should be more of this. So when you say we've allowed you to talk so much, I mean, we're sitting in here trying to absorb it all. Your story, the way that you articulate it, it's really making an impact on me currently.
Right, I have another 5 hours of material.
Exactly, dude. We're here to absorb. And I think, one thing I've that has come up a few times as you've kind of described your story, and really going off of what Andrew's saying, with it being so leading edge and how this has been much of a trend to your career, but also kind of your expertise of kind of looking at doing things a certain way, but doing it within like the confines of like where something is going, right? You're on the cannabis spaceship, but you're just doing it a different way. And your cog in the massive wheel of this thing is a much different cog than what most people would typically associate with cannabis or provide with cannabis. And I think that's really important, because where I'm going with this is I would love to learn about your history with cannabis leading up to it, and kind of how you've seen it change, or how it's had different impacts in your life as you've enjoyed it through your life. Because I mean, we're Andrew and I are 25 years old, and smoking cannabis at an unknown age that we don't want to display here for potentially our mothers and fathers listening. But
right.
Nonetheless,
the papas.
For the mamas and the papas, and basically what I'm saying is it's changed so much throughout our life, but we've seen so much benefit just from the creative standpoint, kicking back with your friends, hanging out. There's a lot of things that have come that are awesome and positive from it. Obviously, the medical side as well. But I'm just curious, just from your standpoint, the history of it in your own life and how you've seen it transform, and if it has at all. Just love to hear kind of how that's transformed, because I'm curious as to where it's going to go now in terms of like when we're parents and we have kids, and that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, and it's interesting because I have kids, and I have a cannabis brand, and I have to be hyper transparent with them about everything. Like they know exactly what I do, and I also smoked when I was young, and I really wish I hadn't smoked so much. It's some of the only research that's really out there. Some of the only solid research is how it does affect young minds, and it's an excessive amount of cannabis is not great for developing minds. But nonetheless, I smoked it every day before biology class in high school, and I know very little about biology. To that end. So I've gone in times where, like in college, I don't think I smoked that much. I sold cannabis in high school and college, and put myself through college selling cannabis. And I actually didn't smoke as much in college, probably as I did in high school. I was kind of like, I got to high school and college, I was feeling like a pro. I already partied so much in high school. I was done in some sense. And, and you see all these kids showing up, like they're just like getting drunk and going crazy. And, it was interesting to watch. I've always but that said, I've always really focused on getting decent grades and knowing what my priorities were, and, knowing what the end goal was. I didn't even, when I say decent grades, I mean like B's, I was smart enough to kind of work with my ADD and get a B. And then in college, I also really didn't I just had trouble learning as well. I got to have a degree in finance. I don't know very much about, unless like one of my worst things. That's when you ask me what I'm average at finance, I have a degree in it. So my son is at Berkeley studying computer science, and he's in this really cool program for computer science and management. It's like an entrepreneur program. And he's there to learn. Like he's taking like physics and these advanced math classes and computer science classes. And he's there. He's so excited about the education. And it like blows my mind because that was not my approach to college. Whatsoever. I would love to go to college right now. That would be awesome. I would, it would be so luxurious. Or maybe a retirement job would be teaching. Another,
could be a
I have it in
potential.
me?
Could just become the professor of cannabis and have your kids start writing, like participate in your journals, give them a couple history lessons. And I think the class would sell out in minutes.
Totally. Could be about creativity. Could be about challenging default thinking, build a more productive life.
Yeah.
Like one of my life philosophies is about perspective, and I have it as a word on my, on my wrist here. Perspective. Like I'm always open to perspective. This is even before I even knew about, challenge default thinking as a concept. I mean, it is the same concept, but I didn't have it in those words. Like I always open to new perspective. Like everything I've learned is a jumping off point to something new. And should I gain more information, I'm willing to change directions, change opinions, and, evolve as a human being. So I'm always in search for perspective, and not because I don't have perspective or I need perspective. It's because I want to expand my perspective, become a more complete human being.
One way that I think perspective is everything. And one thing that I've been challenging myself with reflecting on the perspectives that I have daily is this form of meditation called RAIN, where it's recognize, allow, and nurture, or recognize, allow, invest, and nurture. And this process, it's like trying to recognize an emotion and allow yourself to feel that emotion, and then invest in it with what does this emotion need, and then finishing with nurturing it. And it's like totally, Declan and I, we do this podcast after hours. So there's a lot of angst I feel during the day, like overwhelming kind of sensation of like, holy smokes, I just finished my work day. Now I got to get to this, the thing that I truly love. I love what I do for work, but also this is Declan and I's baby, and we're trying to make something special out of it. And that feeling of angst kind of comes up habitually. And now it's become a pattern, and I haven't been able to like break it. But flipping my perspective on investing in these emotions instead of tagging these emotions with, I just want to get rid of it. It's changed enormously, and I've seen already. I've really only been practicing this for about 20 days, but it's helped tremendously. Now I am not so worried about getting to this or finishing it or rushing to it. It's more so like I am appreciating what I have and having the ability to do this, and the way that I'm feeling is definitely okay, because it's just going to become, it's natural, and trying to suppress it is only going to make it worse.
Yeah. Sounds like a good attitude. Running to it well, accepting it. You got to be careful not to let self-talk manage you. Usually it's like negative and not productive, especially if it's like at 3:00 in the morning. That's something I've really worked at, like managing self-talk. It's a big part of finding happiness and gratitude, and just like shutting that stuff down. Gratitude is another great path to happiness for sure. But shutting down that self-talk, like, this is not useful. Like, it's just like my energy coming up at the worst time because of lack of sleep. It's illogical. But it's funny, like something you were saying earlier reminded me of one of the techniques when you're having like a bad trip. Like if you're like on LSD or mushrooms and you're having a bad experience, you see like monsters or something. They always say to run towards the bad experience, like run to the monster and run through it, and it'll disappear, as opposed to running away from it, and it's always there. Run through it is a technique that I learned early on, and it is somewhat of a classic technique when you're having a bad experience. That's the one thing that any of your listeners take away today.
There it is.
Run to the monster. Run to the monster.
Attack the obstacles, man. I love that. it's funny too, going back to even what you said, about your history with cannabis and everything. And it's like, I could hear and kind of feel what you're saying in terms of like, look, man, like I have the priorities of my life and things that I had to get done. Cannabis was absolutely a part of those things. So it's like when I think back to my parents telling me never to smoke weed, or they'd disown me if they ever caught me with a joint, or whatever these situations were, it was never it may have been because of their lack of knowledge around cannabis in general, but they didn't want me to get invested in it to have it elevate itself to a priority and then take away from the things that actually should be priorities, such as grades, jobs, making a living, all these different things. So I guess I was a little bit jaded in my approach or to the question in general, but just also like there's that's always going to be a stipulation. We're never sitting on the cannabis mountains screaming down like you need it to consume your life because it's going to change you and it's going to make this great person. We're just saying simply, you should try it out because it's great for the things that we're advertising for. And we think it could help you with the other things that you have as priorities in your life. So that's one thing that I've kind of gathered a little bit just through this conversation and dialogue. Is like, what we're promoting, what we're saying is more so like there's so many, I think you're uncovering like there's these really cool benefits that not a lot of people have like dove into on a deeper level and understood. And you're trying to really be a cog to like help them unlock that within themselves. Is that correct in saying that?
Yeah.
Or
I'm helping people optimize. I mean, it's about, the mission of the brand is to optimize creative performance or enhance creative performance. I like optimize as the word. So it's about optimizing yourself, becoming a good person, using cannabis by really breaking through what, holds you back and inhibits you in your thinking. And creative thinking is, by nature evolved new, fresh thinking from you as an individual. So it doesn't have to be, there's big creative and big C and little c. Like it doesn't have to be a big breakthrough idea. It could just be a small, tiny thing that enhances your life, and it's about opening up the aperture more, so if you're like this, and what's great about these journals and what I found really charming is that, I get emails from people from like famous musicians and people like Martin Lawrence and designers and architects and people like that. And also people who make a living by being creative, and then people who don't think they're creative. And both of them use the journal. And the reason is they have different apertures. Like the super creative designer is like leaning into that and opening up their aperture a bit more. The person who's not that creative is feeling that they are a little bit creative or more creative than they thought they were. So it really depends on you, what you get out of the book, whether but the goal is to just move the needle forward, wherever the needle starts. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. And I think the optimization of it all and you offering that experience is wonderful. And the way that Declan and I have challenged to do it in our own life and with this podcast is asking this average quality question. And I know you already answered it with finance, but I'm going to rephrase it here and give you an example. And maybe you can come up, maybe there'll be a different average quality. So an average quality is something you care to get a little better at. For myself, it's my being driven. That is hands down my average quality because it's offered me so much success. Declan and I played football and we were successful on the field because we both are very internally motivated, and we've transferred that over into our work life. But it becomes all consuming. And then this driven personality it's this constant go, go, go. So I've already talked about, with this rain meditation and a couple other things, like trying to, bring down the driver and not make it my every all day long twitch, but having like a more encompassing, healthy, optimized life. That's my average quality. So Shawn, I would like to ask you with that little rephrase there, what is your average quality?
Well, my average, I'm exceptionally average in so many things.
That's great.
It's hard to choose. But like I mentioned this a little bit earlier, not finance, but I'm average in process, systems, and structure. Like I'm the four aspects of a company are generally people, process, systems, and structure. And I'm pretty average in three or four of them. I'm pretty good with people, but I was confused when you answered your question. It sounds like something you're good at that you are leaning into, because I'm pretty good at people, but I have a ton to learn. The more you know, the more you know, the more the more you know what you don't know. Like what you don't know becomes so much more obvious when you really know a lot about something. So, but process, systems, and structure, when you lead a company, are things that you need to create efficiencies and scale a business. And so I've been working at those and put more effort into those and hire smart people around me who can do that. But even just starting this company, there's so many things I'm doing that I never would have done, and I would have been scared to do. I'm importing a bunch of product from China, and I worked at a company. I said a company with about $1 billion sales in fashion, and we moved product from China to Africa to all over the world. And the supply chain people just like freaked me out. Like they would never let me go near. I was CMO, but they would never let me go through supply chain. Like they're like, this is not your personality. You're not like process driven. And so, but I had, as a startup, it was just like me and a graphic designer to start. I'm ordering products from China. They're like, the best way for me to figure this out is to do it. So I just started ordering products. I didn't know how to deal with like tariffs and, duty and shipping and all these things. It's just like, okay, I'm just going to order it and see what happens. Unfortunately, the first product I ordered was like the most difficult thing you could do. It was like these pencils. And there's an anti-dumping law where you can't really, you have to pay 114% tax if you order these from China. And I didn't know that. And then it's retroactive. If they make it 120% next year, you have to, in the next 5 years, you have to pay the tax retroactively. I was like, and then people wouldn't touch it. Like, oh yeah, we don't deal with anti-dumping products. And so I couldn't find anybody to help me get this thing through customs. And it was really kind of difficult, but obviously that made me learn the most about import export. And I've done that over and over with every single thing, almost every aspect of this business. Being an entrepreneur, you have to be smart enough to see around corners and see a product market fit, but dumb enough to know how painful it's going to be to try to get everything done you're about to do.
Yes.
Probably heard that before. I'm sure that's got to be a resounding theme of entrepreneurship on the show.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we also live that too. We have a big season premiere coming up in January. We've set the dates. We know what we kind of need to do, and it's obviously the start of November, and so like the hair's starting to stand up on our arms here. Like, hey, we know it's coming. We know we have a lot of things to hash out. So let's stupidly dive into this and see where it takes us. Because we did it for season 1 earlier this year, and it was a smashing success. Which actually you would probably be kind of interested in it. What we designed a show where people go on blind dates, and it's all set up in a podcast form, and we host it at like a bar, and then we keep the date exclusive, so it's not broadcasted by like a PA or anything, so everyone's tuned in, but they could tune in if they wanted to join like a Twitch stream or something, and they could hear exactly how the date's going. So we did this for 15 weeks straight and built a following, an audience, and a podcast, and then released all the episodes. And it was wild. Like we would set up like one person, like a guy or a girl, and then we would announce that person earlier in the week, and then by the end of the week, we would set that person up with 3 different people who wanted to go on a date with that person. And then we'd have that person speed date each one of them on the show. So we did this over and over and over, got better. We're stupid enough to sign up for the whole idea to begin with. But now it's like we have like the loose structure of how it works. And there's all kinds of things that we want to tinker with. but we know the effort of it. It's like, okay, now we're going to really throw ourselves at it, be really stupid about it. But we think it's a product market fit.
Yeah. Season 2 is the same idea, but you're executing a little bit more proficiency.
Yeah, basically.
100%.
That's kind of our model is once we find something that's a product market fit, we don't try and like blow it to 1 million. We just try and do it a little bit better than we did the first time with a bunch of tinkered things here and there, and then see how it works again. And then basically just do that over and over and over.
Yeah. That's a great, the MVP is a minimum viable product to just get it out and do it. It's like trying to make it perfect before you launch it is a bad idea. Yeah. But important to say, it's important for people that, put beta all over this, like this is an experiment, like if people think I remember 20 years ago, I was listening to this Israeli venture capitalist who, called Yossi Vardi, funny guy, saying is building software is like creating the most beautiful, top-of-the-line, convertible Mercedes-Benz, and then a German Shepherd comes and takes a shit in the front seat. And no matter how good you clean the seat, everyone just remembers the German Shepherd. And I was like, what does that mean, Yossi? But what he was trying to say was like, you only get one chance to make a first impression, and everyone remembers it. And that kind of used to be the thing. Like don't release something until it's really good. The new thinking is really minimum viable product. Get it out there. Everything is a guess until you start getting consumer feedback. Then develop a dialogue with your customers, ask them, get them involved with the process, thank them, love them, let them know this is like the first iteration and it's going to be better because of you. And that's really, that's the best way to release product now.
Absolutely. And, kind of going off that, we as entrepreneurs, we kind of have to take these certain steps in where we know it's going to suck, or we or like the colored pencils things where it's like you're in the heat of the fire trying to figure this out. But eventually, like you come out on top and you figure out, and I have the colored pencils like in my RV. So it's like you've clearly succeeded in that task in itself. So congrats on the colored pencils. But one thing, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying from China to my house to you.
That's right. So simply the question is, what's in your back pocket? So when you're in these anxious moments or you're in these high pressure moments where you need a solution, what kind of internal things do you rely on to come out on top?
That's easy. My humor is always in my back pocket. It's like laughter is the pressure valve on this life. So, there's one of my favorite sayings is only the insane take themselves seriously. Mm-hmm. Like no matter what happens, you have to laugh at yourself. This is like, it's like, remember, there's a saying, like what's the saying? It's like, remember where you come from, where you're going, and why you got yourself in this mess in the first place. Like, you started this mess. You have the luxury of creating it. Now solve it, laugh at it. Don't take yourself too seriously. So laughter, laughter has been a big driver for me my whole life. Like connecting, it's the shortest distance between two people. When two people laugh at something together, like so much happens above the line and below the line. Like you see the world the way I appreciate irony and I appreciate the unvarnished truth and the way you see it. And, it's a great bridge. So use laughter. I use it. It's important. I used to kind of have this rule, like anybody I hire has to be funny, but then I found people who were really qualified that weren't that funny. So I relaxed the rule and now they just have to think I'm funny. So
love the culture.
It's not less hard, still hard.
Right on.
Not taking yourself seriously. That's something. How old is your son? He's in college. Is he
18? Freshman. Another one is 15.
Wow.
Okay. We're 25, but we're still on this social media consumed by portraying yourself and taking yourself too seriously and making sure everyone's looking at you, pointing at you, and oh, that guy's doing something cool. That person's interesting. And it's super encompassing. And
yeah, totally. I mean, I help fuel a lot of this anxiety with MySpace.
That's right.
That's true. You kind of began all this great stuff. I would say it's still great.
I think you need to break through the clutter in this world, and really, the best way is to be yourself and to find what's interesting in yourself. I about a year and a half ago, I was on my computer, and my wife and I split up maybe 15 years ago for a little while, and I went on dating sites to like meet people, and I found my dating profile from Match.com, which was probably the leading dating site at that time. And I was reading it, and it was funny. It was like, it said the headline, I'm into like architecture, music, and like design or something like that. And then it said, I have a ball made of rubber bands that's pretty big, not the biggest, but respectably large. And I was like, why did I write that? Like, that's an interesting thing to put in your dating headline. And I think I was looking for people like who would just get it, who would be like, oh, this guy, that's funny. Like I started off with like some tasteful, cultured things, and then I balanced it with like something inane. So people would be, so women at the time would be like, oh, that's funny. This guy's got a sense of humor. Like, or someone would be like, that guy's so weird. And that's obviously that's a filter. I don't want to, the people who aren't going to get that or find that, remotely amusing are just not the people I wanted to meet. So in social media, humor is a great way to connect. If you're not funny, it's an awful way to connect. But definitely being yourself. You come to these situations like, why didn't she like me for me instead of the person I pretended I was when we first started dating? Can't figure it out. Yeah. It's like, dude, we all get into those. My mom said, always be yourself, because if you're not, you're going to miss out on someone who really likes you. And that's probably some of the best advice my mom ever gave me.
Amen. And I think, Deck and I have leaned into that a little bit more. Recently, we fell in love with the Beastie Boys. More me specifically, I fell in love with the Beastie Boys, and I pawned it off onto Deck. But those guys, you're a New York guy.
Yeah.
Those guys were unapologetically brash. They were themselves, and throughout their career, they messed up many times, and they realized it. And then they were like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said this. I shouldn't have had that song, Girls," and totally knock what it is to be a woman. And I'm wrong. And Ad Rock had the awesome quote of saying, "It was." I'd rather be a hypocrite than die and never change. And that's not taking yourself too seriously. Like, hey, whatever, change your mind and get better while you're doing it. So
I think there's a Bette Midler quote where I think she says, I don't agree with everything I say. And I always like to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Like, just so you know, I don't agree with everything I say, no matter what comes out of my mouth. I'm throwing things out there. I'm just seeing, I'm testing ideas, spaghetti walling, seeing what makes sense.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a little bit of social media sometimes. And, people can, I think a lot of it is like people can perceive it to whatever they want it to be. And that has its own adverse effects on people internally, right? Depending on how they take it. And I think that is like the number one drive for buzz, right? And trying to elicit a certain emotion out of someone. But again, that could be that is straying away from like the purpose of like really what we're getting at in terms of like portraying yourself, because there is this balance of being like the empath of like, I am selling journals online and I need to sell, like, I know my product is for this type of person. But then there's also like this idea of like, this journal, we want this journal to represent something, and we want it to exude that type of personality or this type of thing. And through that, we will reach the person. So I think sometimes there's a fine line where you're like, trying to like elicit or attack versus just be yourself.
One thing I've learned, like one thing I noticed from the social media generation and people more in your age range is that everyone is like aggrieved ready. Like they are just ready to be upset by something. They're looking for something to be upset by. And it's just so dumb. Like whatever happened to like assuming positive intent? Like I had that as my signature on my email. Like, please excuse grammar and typos and assume positive intent. Like, it's like people are just so ready to be upset. So to lean into that, one of my best performing ads was, this journal is not for the man, people afraid of change, people stuck in the past, like I forgot, like, you know, 2 other things or 3 other things about like who it's not for, which was interesting because people connect, you know, nothing so fortifies a friendship as a mutual enemy. So I really leaned into that, which is also one of the reasons my wife and I like improved our relationship after we had kids, is because we never had like a mutual enemy to focus on. So
what a bot. The kids say the marriage.
That kid was an ass. I wouldn't be friends with that kid. I wasn't related to him. Wait till you have kids. You'll know. But that's interesting. Like one of the things that really, really like bothers me about sort of like social media and younger people is this aggrieved ready thing. Like everything's out of context. I'm just ready to be upset. I don't know any context. They just know a quote. And then, you know, media obviously isn't helping.
Right.
You know, it's just adding to the whole problem. It's just, I guess it's just the world we live in.
Yeah.
But it doesn't bring happiness in any way, shape, or form.
Right. And honestly though, like this whole complex of like the topic of social media, it's like the people who are the most successful on it are just because they're making connections and like finding other people who are like-minded in the same space and then doing stuff that's probably not even associated with social media. It's such an opportunity generator and a community generator that like that's why it's really irreplaceable. There's so much BS on the top of the funnel service that people can get people react to, that people get upset about, that people really laugh at, go viral, whatever it is. Like that's all surface level in my opinion. And below that, for that surface level, how you may find an influencer, how we may have found you, or vice versa, right? There's a connection point that can be utilized. And that's how we see it. I mean, Andrew and I don't live together anymore, so we have to. A lot of us finding guests and stuff is like, who do we really, you know, feel like we are drawn to, and who are we truly curious about, and those are the people that we can, you know, eventually work together with on, or just have that type of person in your community, in your court, to leverage and use later in life. And I've seen so many friends, so many people that we're all buddies with, who've had their whole job, you know, found from social media, not because they're on social media every day, but just simply because they met someone through that. They sent them a DM or whatever it may be. I mean, it's so powerful, and so many people just kind of miss that point, or they know it exists, but they don't give it the value it deserves. And it's crazy.
Offers a lot of great stuff. Like so many people get married, or you have like the gay kid, you know, in some like way, you know, rural town who isn't alone, and he's not a weirdo. He's meeting like-minded people, and he's like, you know, not suicidal because he feels like he's not because he's got people who are like him, you know. So connecting with like-minded people is helpful. It can also be detrimental. You know, we've seen that too.
Yeah.
But people making money off social media, you know, democracy happening, uprisings and wrongs being righted. A lot of great stuff happens from social media, and a lot of bad stuff. It's like you need to know how to use it properly. In the early days of MySpace, you know, we were like, it's like with teenagers, we're like, it's like a hot stove. Like you teach your kids not to touch a hot stove. You have to teach them not to put personal information online and how to act online. And, you know, it's a new paradigm. You need to know how to, this is again, a while ago, now it's sort of second nature. People, we know how to treat social media for the most part. We don't always follow the rules, but we certainly know what the rules are.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
Where back then in the early days of social media, it was a little less clear.
Yeah, there's so much going on. A lot of fugazi, a lot of fugazi. But Declan and I over here, we have a consistent message that we're pushing out on social media, and it's to Mars we go. Mars is the destination. We're not entirely sure what it means. However, we're on that first shuttle to Mars. We're ready to innovate. We're ready to take a risk that no one has ever taken. And now we're asking this question to yourself, Shawn. As an adventurer, as a pilgrim, what does Mars look like to you?
Well, it's funny you should ask, because my one is at Berkeley and is the first graduate of Elon Musk's school. And, we started middle school, and it was like, everyone always said it was like a prep school for Mars, breeding ground for Mars inhabitants. And the focus of that school was, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. That was really the essential skills that they thought these kids would need to thrive in a job marketplace post 2040. I'm not a huge fan of Mars as a destination. It's cold, it's windy. I really like Earth. Costa Rica, particularly. Mars was more like Costa Rica. I'd totally be there.
That's a great quote.
But yeah, I'm all for, destinations and adventure. As Elon says, he's like, yeah, I hope to die on Mars, just not on impact. I'm not a big, I get if Mars is a metaphor, I'm all for it.
Nice.
Mars is a particular destination, I'm less excited.
That's a great answer. It's funny because we've asked this question, we've instituted it for a couple months now, and most people are just metaphorical right away. Like they want to create, whatever that goal is, that is Mars to them. But I love your answer. I think you're the first literal answer, coming from someone who lives in sunny California. Why would you ever leave? It makes no sense to go to somewhere windy and far more brash than even Minnesota. That's awesome. So it sounds like Elon Musk, he's probably expected to give the graduation speech, huh?
At that school? Yeah, somewhat. There was a class of 3 people in that graduating class.
Oh, so they should be definitely just like, I feel like the reward should just be going into eat, have a nice meal with Elon. I think that'd be sick.
When the school started, it was 5 of Elon's kids and 3 other kids. And then it, grew probably to about, 18 kids when my son left. Then maybe about 30 kids in total. Really special, unique place, changed my son's life. A project-based learning school where everything was gamified. These kids would start a drone company, and they'd have to learn Excel to put together bids. And it was really about ethics was a huge part of it too. It was almost like my perception of the school was it was a school of ethical capitalists. Because all these things were a lot of these project-based learning things were building companies, different kinds of companies. You're the UN and I'm Korea and you're China, just negotiation and building something and scaling something. But there was ethics was infused into every single thing they did. Wow, it's really super interesting.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. Kind of goes hand in hand with what he just kind of went. That kind of just was a national story. I think I found it on Twitter, therefore it's a national story.
Which one?
Elon Musk, someone said a percentage of Elon Musk's income, if he were to use that, he could solve world hunger.
Oh yeah, right.
And yeah, I think it was 10% or 20. And he's and it was ended up being 9 billion or 6 billion.
6 billion.
And yeah, 6 billion. And he comments below, he goes, I'm happy to use that 6 million to solve world hunger. Show me how I can do it. And the only thing I ask is that all the transactions are completely open and not like everyone can see the transactions. Ethical is in his nature.
One of the tests to get into the school, it was very different. Like there was a bunch of different tests, but one of them was for these kids who are like 8, 9, 10, 11. I helped actually with some of the, vetting of some of these kids, and the headmaster was like, if you like, there was an essay they had to write as like the first step, and headmaster was like, if you see an essay that has double spacing, flag it, because it means that the parent wrote it. Kids don't double space anymore. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought about that. And then, but once you get tested, there's like past this, like they bring you in, and there's like one of the questions is there's a fireman, a policeman, a teacher, a mayor, and like I might be getting this wrong, like and a soldier. And how much you have $1 million? Who gets paid what and why? How do you split up the $1 million between these 5 professions, and why? And obviously, there's no right answer, but they wanted to see how these kids think, and a lot can happen in answering that question. Ethics and perspective, and I mean, so much transpires when a 8 to 12-year-old answers that question. It was really fascinating, and I might have the professions wrong. I'm not sure they're exactly the ones I said, but they were like different kinds of jobs, that you have authority over other people. And that was really just to really kind of show you how that school thinks and where they're going.
Yeah.
Where they're going.
Interesting. So it was like a K through 12 or something close to that duration, or because I guess I misunderstood. I thought it was in college originally, but
school. It was more like maybe 3rd through 8th grade, and no grades. Everything was played a level. So you have kids who were doing like calculus in the 2nd grade. Like there were some exceptional minds at this school. They had like Po Shen Lo, the World Math Olympics coach, like taught math there for 2 weeks, teaching 12-year-olds, math. It was really an exceptional experience, and it was an experiment for Elon, and they've open sourced a lot of the learning too. Wow. It was pretty impressive, and I learned to respect Elon and what he's about even more from the way he taught his kids, and he certainly educated mine. Anyway, just what he was trying to do with that.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, dude. I mean, we're obviously massive Elon fans, so good to hear that he continues to impress on multiple fronts. It's always so funny because you talk about him to various people, and some people will talk very surface level about him, like smoking weed on Joe Rogan, and then like you'll hear something like this where it's like, wow, I never even knew that he even did something like that. And he's done all kinds of stuff in that realm of what you're talking about.
So Joe Rogan episode is like, it's a pretty forgetting about the cannabis part. Like you listen to that episode, you're like, wow, like this guy is amazing. He's like, what drives him is to make the world a better place, really. And it really does. It really does. I mean, that is what drives him. Is all about optimization of life on Earth, and then certainly beyond that.
Yes.
Right on. Well, we will. In all of it, really is a challenge, and we stand by the challenge, and face that challenge, every day. And one of the things like we love asking is the challenge question, like who would you challenge us to get on the show, or who would you recommend us to have on the podcast to keep this train rolling? Do you have anybody either in your court or someone that big, far out as a reach guest? We'd love to hear your recommendations.
Besides, who.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should have a bunch of mothers of entrepreneurs on this show and ask them what it's like. What qualities did they have? Like, what did you see the spark? What was different about them? Like successful entrepreneurs, clearly. What did you do or didn't do? Did you have anything to do with it? I think that would be, that's a non-obvious question, non-obvious answer to your question, like taking a slightly different approach to it.
Yeah. I love that response. Those that have listened to the last 4 or 5 episodes, we're a pro mom podcast. Very, very pro mom. We love our moms. If you're listening right now, Mom, I love you. And we've had some entrepreneurs with like one-off products, CPG type products, and we continuously say, like, however they describe their target market, we always bring up, you need to get to the moms. I think that's your next step. Those are the ones that are going to be influencing the decisions long term. And if you get to the moms, you probably should get to the grandmoms, because those people are then talking to the grandkids. Yeah. And it's, at the end of the day, the target market is moms.
It's always been the moms.
It's always been moms. They are the influencers at the end of the day.
It's like the Hot Wheels market that you were talking about earlier, Shawn. You are no stranger to mom marketing.
Love moms. Without moms, we wouldn't have, in their maiden names, we wouldn't have a banking system.
Oh, that's a new take. I like it. Right on, man. So yeah, no, we're super high on moms. Team mom, honestly. It's so hard to make an argument against a mom. Like, if you ever think about it, like, it's so widely recognized as you can't hate on moms. So we've definitely hung our hats on it. We probably should make some shirts, Andrew. Now I think about it, that'd be stupid not to do that.
I have a shirt. I have a mom shirt that I bought from us, like something about like made with the, like, I forgot what it says, like love, gratitude, and fierceness of my mom or something. Something like that.
That's perfect.
Yeah, my son for Mother's Day.
There you go, man. Got it. You absolutely have to. But that's I just gotta say, man, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. We've been chopping it up for almost damn near 2 hours. It's almost sun is almost setting out here on the West Coast.
Who's gonna edit this?
Our producer Marcus. We just hired him full time, so he's got plenty of time on his hands.
Okay.
He'll be able to rock this one. And it's really. Oh, go ahead.
How are you gonna edit it down to?
We don't edit it at all. So actually, Marcus's job's pretty simple. He just needs to compile and produce. And basically switch the cameras between the three of us for an hour 50.
No one's gonna watch this thing for an hour and 43 minutes.
Oh yeah.
Come
on now, Shawn.
Yeah.
We got there's the listeners.
You'd be surprised.
Die hard. The back end listeners, they love us.
Yeah. Well, we'll have them shoot you an email or something if they make it this far. There will be a few at least.
A little Easter egg at the end of this thing.
Yeah, you gotta have something for them. So is an email a good way to go, you think, or should we have them hit you up a different way?
Well, I don't want to get too many emails. You hit me up on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, love that.
Mention the the Backpocket podcast.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. We'll send them that way. But yeah, man, it's been a hell of a time, and we don't chop these out. We don't cut anything out because we are purists in the sense that we just love the conversation, and we never try and take any part of our conversation away from someone who would want to enjoy. And like we said, podcasts, people will listen to them for as long as they please. So as long as they feel like they're getting value from it. And without a doubt, you provided a ton of value today. And that's why we know that there's going to be people flooding the inbox of LinkedIn.
If you say so. Yeah. And now I have this hour and 45-minute video. I'm going to put it in Dropbox maybe, and you guys are going to lift it?
That's correct. You got it, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sweet. One final question for you, Shawn, before we wrap up. What did you learn today from the moment that you woke up to when we're having this conversation?
What did I learn today? I'm sure I learned something. I learned a lot of stuff. I was educated on like really some tactical stuff about a back end system of this delivery service that I'm using. Trying to think of something profound that I learned today. I learned a lot of little things. See, there was something I was reading earlier. I was thinking about startups and how they're, the high highs and low lows are often like, the high, like there's so many great highs in a startup, and you do them for the highs, you do them for the endorphin release in some sense. I'm making an impact to be one of those endorphin releases. But they're like, a friend of mine sold his startup for a lot of money. And in some sense it was sad in that it was the end. He like the little wins along the way are like really the joy, like coming up with an idea and testing it, and it works, and optimizing it, and it works. And, the high highs and low lows are like often 15 minutes apart. It's definitely an emotional roller coaster, but it's those little wins along the way that are really why you do it. Every day there's sometimes like, that thing worked. Oh shit, that thing broke. Like, it's like, that's just life. And stuff happens all the time. Like big problems happen all the time. And I expect them. Like, I'm saddened by them, but I'm not broken by them. I'm like, okay, this is the thing that's happening this week, that we got to solve. Like, if you're if you're not having problems, you're not in business. If you're not breaking things, you're not in business. You got to just expect the unexpected to happen. It's like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. As long as it's just 2 steps back, you're good.
Right. Seriously.
Forward, 4 steps back, less good.
Less good. It's still a problem, and means you're still breaking stuff. Just depends on how severe you're breaking things.
So that was something I was thinking about today. Like, just problems. Like, you know what? Just don't give me health problems. Give me give me finance problems, legal problems. Just don't give me health problems.
I love that.
I'm good.
Yeah, dude, I love that. The fascination and the thrill of problem solving simply is something I personally I enjoy every single day. I mean, I got an engineering degree, have an engineering job full time, and then have this side project of Backpocket that we hope to build as a entity one day that could take up our full time. It's problems and then problems in our normal operating lives. I mean, it's a thrill start to finish. And I love what you said about like, I'll take any problem besides health problems. And it's like so crazy to see people like throw that to the side and just let it and eventually have it come back to bite them. And it's like, it's sad because I see it, in my day to day in construction, but it's pretty, I've never heard it spoken that way. And I really appreciate it.
I think it goes back to that quote I threw out earlier, which is like, remember where you come from, where you're going, and why you got yourself in this mess in the first place.
Sure, man.
Amen, Shawn. Thank you so much, and really appreciate these 2 hours you've given us. This has been great.
Peace, guys. Great to talk with you. It was easy, fun. You made me think of some useful things.
Good. As long as we brought some value and extracted some good thoughts to hold on to, that's a winning podcast in our books.
Totally. It was very enjoyable.
Right on, man. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you.